discussion, review and rank potential site locations for the relocation of the public works facility. And I'll just turn it over to administration if that's okay.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Honestly, I'm happy to be talking to you tonight, something other than budget, and something that moves housing forward as well. So both pretty exciting, actually. So as you see in the memo, there are 3 locations. Actually, we talked about a whole bunch more, but 3 locations that have possibilities to put the public works. And I'm calling it facility rather than just shop because, I don't know, in my mind that encompasses all the things they have out in the yard. So, I don't know. I'll probably go back and forth between facility and shop, but to accommodate that. And the 3 locations were the Fort Raymond property, the remaining portion of the Fort Raymond property that isn't sold, the City of Seward snow dump site, which is on Laurel Street, and then the Gillespie properties that are on the highway, on the Seward Highway. And I know you're all familiar with them. We do have this map, just in case. So the Fort Raymond site, after the 3.31 acres is sold to Chugach-Mute, 7.73 acres remain for development. Although it's adequate for the public works facility, I don't believe it's the highest and best use of the property. Meaning it could be developed for housing, for a mixed use, commercial. None of that has been identified, but to me that makes more sense to have that location be for a different use rather than the public works shop facility. And like I said, there hasn't been a development planned for the remaining acres, and once there is one, if the council indicates a different location, then we'll work on a development plan and bring that forward to you at a different date. The snow dump site was examined for a possible location. The site is 6.05 acres, and in order to make it really operational, a lot of fill will have to come in to build something on it. A concern was expressed regarding possible flooding during rain events, and as you can see, Stephanie Presley is here, so she can actually give you a lot more details than I can. Stephanie indicated that due to the levee on Dick Graff Road, the potential flooding has been mitigated. However, the borough and the floodplain board group are working on getting detailed LiDAR information for that area. That'll be part of their LiDAR work that they're going to do. And it would be good to get that information to ensure that there's not flooding at that location. And when we talked to Doug about it, he expressed the importance of retaining that property for the snow dump. So, and please feel free to ask me questions. I'm just giving you the high-level overview. And then the Gillespie properties, which are located at 204 and 2405 and 2413 Seward Highway, are for sale. Mr. Ray Gillespie contacted me about the properties and expressed his desire to sell the properties to the city. The properties are directly adjacent to the snow dump site and would actually enhance the public works operations. And the property has adequate fill and does not appear to have any flooding issues. And the in the memo, but the described LiDAR information will also provide information on that site. The site is large enough to accommodate the public works as well as additional facilities should the council decide to add more buildings at a later time. So kind of a co-location option is available for that site. The Kenai Peninsula Borough has the properties valued at $295,000 for the 2405 property, and 2413 is valued at $148,000. And Mr. Gillespie stated that the asking price is $500,000 for both properties. However, there is room for negotiation on those. And based on, and like I said, this is high-level overview, but based on this information and then, of course, detailed information as we were working through the process, my request would be for the council to direct the city manager. You can't do that at this meeting, let me back up, but at the end of talking and then for a future meeting to direct the city manager to negotiate the purchase of the 2 properties, the Gillespie properties, and then the funding mechanism would be the sale, use the proceeds from the sale of the Fort Raymond property. And if you agree with this recommendation, I request direction to be placed on as an action item on an upcoming agenda that would direct me to enter into negotiations. And then following successful negotiations, the process in the code would be followed, which would mean the public hearing process and all of those other processes would be followed. And I have noted the language in the memo as well. And then following all of that, eventually then we'll have to get down to, talking about the bond for building the shop, but we're not there yet for that. This is just the starting point of selecting the location. And then we do have a funding mechanism to purchase that, should that be the council's recommendation. And then later, we'll continue to develop the public works, what we want in the building, and bring all of that forward, but we're not there yet. We do have some general ideas, and Doug is here for that, but we do have some general ideas. And then we have started the process of level 1 and 2.
Level 2
Yeah.
mitigation test.
Thank you. Mitigation testing on the existing site, and so mitigation on the existing site as well, so that when it's time to sell, and then we'll know if there needs to be any remediation on those properties.
Thank you. So before I bring it to council for comment and questions, I might just check with the public and see if there's any comments from the public or questions. Okay, if there is a question or a comment from the public, we can come back to you. Let me bring it back to council. Are there, go ahead.
I have a question about the Gillespie property, probably for Doug. Where would you access that with trucks and stuff?
It's got 2 entrances off the highway, closer toward Big Giraffe Road, and then we would probably then put an exit entrance out toward the snow dump off the back.
Okay.
There is an entrance off of Hemlock, but it actually goes through another city property.
Right, that's what I was.
If the city has both, that can be massaged however it works, or if there's something additional to be there. We would look to be at the north end more and come this way so we could utilize those extra accesses over there and stay out of the public.
Okay, I
Go
have
ahead.
a second question. Somewhere back in my mind, there was a concern by somebody about the airport being across the street and airplanes flying over. Was that an issue, or was I thinking of something else?
It's the dock bring up. It was brought up in their plan as what is the safety zone for the
Right.
airport. And they had something on their flats, which was going through the platting right now. So what does that include? And I don't remember for
That's
sure,
what-
but I think it went across both the snow dump and that. So is there a restriction or not? I don't know.
Okay, because that's a big thing, there is.
Yeah, it wasn't called safety zone, it had another
Yeah.
name to it. But it was,
Runway protection zone,
uh,
RPZ. And actually, Stephanie might have that, because she's
Yeah.
been dealing with the airport.
Yeah, so the new runway will be offset about 100 feet from the existing 1634. And the runway protection zone would run more over the Seward Highway towards Resurrected River than it would towards the Dick Raff Road zone.
Because
This
the
is
runway's
assuming-
moving to the east.
This is assuming that actually happens, and then,
Right.
correct.
That's a good question. Go ahead.
Are there city lots all the way around that lot, the Gillespie lot?
Yes, it is the snow dump. Yes.
That
So-
other triangle on Hemlock is a city lot also.
Yeah. So it's surrounded by the highway, bordered by the highway, and then on the backside, the snow dump, and then that triangle piece that goes up at Hemlock, it's a small triangle piece there. And that's a city lot also.
Go ahead, did you? Go ahead.
The only question I had was, we're talking about Fort Raymond property money. We weren't thinking about saving that for a different use? It seems like we went through so many different things with, we were gonna take this money and use it for something else. And I'm trying to remember, I thought we were saying that sale of that land at Fort Raymond money was gonna go to,
DRP?
Yeah,
DRP, and then also motor.
Paying
Paying
back
back
the
the
animals, the
Animal
loan
shelter.
from the motor pool to pay for the animal shelter.
in a couple things in the mix.
So in the resolution, when council authorized the construction contract with Dawson for the animal shelter, there was verbiage in there indicating that the loan from the motor pool fund would be paid back with any subsequent sale of municipal land. So I think that's probably what you're referencing.
So we'd have to be really specific in our resolution. if we want to
Correct.
change that.
Doug, is there any other reason aside from the snow, having to put the snow there, that we can't use that land? The snow dump.
The snow dump area?
Yeah.
The snow dump area right now is the lowest spot out there. The levee on Beecraft Road does protect from the Resurrection River flooding. It'll be interesting to see the new LiDAR and where that all comes out and how that comes to be as far as FEMA's maps. We do have issues with regular flooding coming down out of Jack Creek or just all that mountain there comes right to that. So I guess my question would be on the fill. What would kind of Army Corps permit would we need to raise, and what does that do to those properties adjacent as you go to the west? So there's some issues there with raising it, but with our snow dump, we're required by DEC to have a snow dump. We used to be able to dump right on the beach. We were dumping all the snow out there, and the tide would take it away. It was awesome. But it was pollution, right? Is what they found out, is that it's polluting, and they actually fined Cordova millions of dollar fine because of it, and made them do a study in lieu of the fine. The study came out by Dowell, and they had to do 3 or 4 coastal communities, Anchorage, Juneau, and I think it was Cordova, along with the others. So when they did those, they have their guidelines for the snow dump siting areas that we have to have. I don't know where else we're gonna put it. We can't put it next to the river on the other side of Beecraft, because it's going right in the river. The thing with that spot where the snow dump is, we have both vegetation and a gravel area. That doesn't mean we couldn't come back toward Hemlock and use some of that, right? I mean, there's years where last year we were pretty full on, we try to use these in town just because they're close or convenient. Whether we can always do that, it's still a DEC question. We have been using what we can, but we filled them all yet last year. And then we ended up going a little better than half full out on the Beecraft Road on the snow dump area. That's our designated one. The reason where we're at is just how do you do it economically, right? Because when we're running dump trucks with snow in them from downtown, it's quicker right here. It's cheaper, it's more efficient. The more we run out, and once we're full and have to run Beecraft, and you're running dump trucks all the way to Beecraft Road, it adds up. Now, if you go even further somewhere, it just makes that turn time so much longer and so much longer to get the snow removed down here. So it's not the most ideal, but it's the best we have had at the time for a snow dump. I mean, I'm open to ideas too, but I know we have to have a designated one, and that was what they did when the study came out in, I believe it was 2015 or 16 when it came out, and that was designated as the spot to put it at the time.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just jump out and say, I'm not a fan of the Fort Raymond property. I think there are higher, better uses there, even if it's divide up that land and sell it to private developers for something. And I really didn't like the idea of city heavy machinery entering on and off the Sea Lion. I think that would be a conflict with kids and buses during 9 months of the year. So I'm just going to say that wasn't my preferential spot. I'll just throw that out there. I don't know if we can knock that one off or not. Go ahead.
Well, it just bothers me that we're gonna spend $500,000 to buy land.
I know.
When we've got land. And, I love the family up there, but that land's been for sale for a very long time. And, I think negotiations, if there's negotiations, they should be very aggressive, because
I
that
do
land's
agree.
been sitting there since I can remember, for sale. You know, I know everybody, it's just, I think, I don't know, I haven't heard anything from the public on this, probably they're just not aware, but it just seems like it sure would be nice if we could use that snow dump area, but you're right, we can't just plow it into the water anymore, I guess, so.
Quite honestly, to use the snow dump area, you'd almost spend $500,000 to bring that
fill.
material up. I mean, you have a sizable amount of material over 4 acres that you almost pay, just by buying the land, you pay
Is
for what
that
you would have
much?
done, plus you got to keep the snow dump.
Well, I know that,
Go ahead.
I
Thank
know
you.
that the Gillespie property has been filled. I mean,
Right.
there was a time when I think they were gonna almost sell it or something, but, you know, it has been filled. And I'd like to sort of ask Stephanie too, I mean, that's not much of a barrier there. I know it was a big deal and it's supposed to protect, but is it, I mean, the flood board feels that the dike or whatever there is adequate? I mean, we haven't had a big flood yet, right?
Yeah, not since '86. Kind of in perspective, the 2012 event was maybe a 70-year flood event. It wasn't even close to a big flood event. So basically, the northern portion of Seward has the alluvial fan, you know, we built all over it. And the '86 event, we built the top section of the levee. The '95 event, we built the second section of the levee. And following 2006, we built the paved section of Digraff Road. And so that was to protect Forest Acres from Resurrection River flooding. It was built at the time 2 feet above the base flood elevation. Those were based on our 1981 flood insurance rate maps. Looking at the conversion with our new, now outdated, but our new FEMA maps, most of Digraff Road, the paved section, is still above the base flood elevation. It's not 2 feet above the base flood elevation, but it's still above the base flood elevation. With the exception of kind of that lower level of the levee that meets up with Digraff Road, and you know, you kind of moved across the pavement and you're in that dirt area before the levee starts up the hill. That section is below current base flood elevation. So what the flood board has recommended is that we collect new LiDAR data, that we have a new water resource, or have a water resource engineer do a new flood hazard mapping. And what I anticipate they'll find is that most of Digraff Road protects from Resurrection River flooding, but that we have ponding issues in that northeastern corner. So the snow dump site is probably the low-lying spot in that entire corner of the alluvial fan, and that's where any floodwaters that were to break over the lower section of the levee, if Resurrection River was to overtop that area, it would probably, you know, run down the south side of Digraff Road and pond, kind of at that snow dump area. So in order to build above flooding, you probably have to bring in a lot of fill on the snow dump site.
The snow dumps.
Go ahead. And I absolutely agree with you, Councilmember McClure, that aggressive negotiations need to be had. I absolutely agree with you.
Who does the negotiations?
That's digesting
I know, it just-
information. So I guess maybe describe for us on that site, you know, I know there's been no engineering, but what would kind of be your vision for how Public Works would be laid out on the Gillespie potential, the third site? If you have that, if you don't have that, then.
No, I think it's just a portion as we go through that. We definitely are retaining that triangle at the other end, but that could be enveloped into one city property if we want. So it's all one property, then we can do what we need to on that end. I would envision that we would put the public works, like I said, at the north end. That's where the 2 highway entrances are. We'd be able to come in there, so we'd probably have admin at that far end, then the main building, and maybe it's all one, but the building would come down parallel kind of to the highway, but turn just a little bit. And then the sand shed would go down beyond that, and equipment and everything would be parked. We try to keep that tree buffer that's going right there as much as we can to kind of fence that in. The area would have to be fenced, but I would love to have a thing as you're coming in. Maybe it's a welcome to Seward, maybe it's a mural like at the visitor center area, something along there to just dress it up, plus it kind of hides, but it'll be a newer building. It's gonna look nice, and the whole area we're looking at, we don't want it to look, you know, that's why we want the equipment back in a little bit and being hid behind the buildings. And, you know, I don't know if it's hid is the right word, but just so it's just more obscure, so you're not just seeing equipment sitting there. But that's how I would envision it, is coming from that end. That would then leave the closer end with the triangle and the area closer to Hemlock more open for something there if we need to do something.
We wanted to, again, think about the future, so that way if we needed another location for another building, or we're going to build, who knows? I'm just gonna say maybe public safety, I don't know. But maybe another building, it could be at the triangle. So it'd be a co-location of city properties, kind of like that would be all city area right there.
Go ahead. There's two triangles. There's a triangle off of Hemlock and a triangle off of Digraph. So, yeah, the triangle off of Digraph is the snow dump.
Yeah, it's kind of a trapezoid looking thing here, this biggest area.
And
Got the
then,
Gillespie properties here, which is the ones we were talking, this one,
Right.
this one. It kind of comes over at an angle. Okay, this is a triangle, this is a city parcel that parallels all of Hemlock.
okay,
Can you
There-
see this? There, I didn't get it too far over. But that parallels all of Hemlock, so this is already city property. The idea would be to take these, this would be the snow dump property, and where we're talking about maybe something different, we'd start public works at the far end, the north end, and would leave this end more open to do something down here at the triangle in that very end. We'd be pushing equipment down that way and that sand shed, but we'd be able to at least get all of public works in one spot. You know, all of the equipment, we have a lay down yard. It's unsightly in the back here. We've got all those white bags of salt we use every year, and you know, we have our cracked seal stuff back in there. All that stuff just adds up, and ideally we could kind of have it tucked away a little bit there.
I did, there's a long, skinny, weird parcel all the way along Dick Rapids City. Does any of the snow dump go in that?
Nope. That's all city property, and that, I believe, and I'd have to read the whole plating on it, was set aside for flooding along Dick Raff Road. That the city bought those, yes.
Yeah, it's resource management.
Yeah, that whole area, there, I think the end lot, as you come up here, there's a small lot at the top, and then these lots, then you have the, right along Diamond, there's just a couple that hit against Dick Raff, then there's one or two more lots that the city owns along Dick Raff, and all that is when this floods out of Jap Creek here and comes down, if it busts through, it comes right down along that side. And then that's what it was set aside for.
What's the current acreage that Public Works is on right now?
Public Works is on about 2.5 acres right now, and then spread out in different locations with all kinds of stuff.
The city lot across the street from Dick Raff, on the other side of Dick Raff.
Against the river there?
To the north, yeah,
Mhm.
is, I mean, I guess where I'm going is there room to expand into that trapezoid off of Dick Raff? For infrastructure, if we needed more snow load, could we also dump on the other side of Dick Raff?
It's got that end of Japanese Creek, Jap Creek that comes right down along and winds through that whole area. We have, I don't think that with our DEC that we could even dump in that area at all.
Go ahead.
Stephanie, we did talk to Stephanie about that, and if she could explain what the requirements would be for that one, that would be good.
Sure. So the Resurrection River floodway does go into that section of property. The area between Digraff Road north to Japanese Creek, you would have some fish and game and Fish and Wildlife Service requirements. Speaking with Fish and Game, I highly doubt they would allow any sort of snow dump to be placed in Japanese Creek, mainly because of pollution issues. If you put salt and tire into an anadromous waterway, you're going to kill off all the fish. So it's very unlikely that DEC and Alaska Fish and Game would allow snow dump north of Digraff Road.
Just one question, based on the amount of space that you have now, this is about 5 3/4 acres that we're looking at with the two properties. You're gonna need about half of that or 2/3 of that, do you know, or have you thought about the actual acreage you would need?
One of the biggest reasons for us to, not only that we can move out of the residential, is that we busted out of this building 20 years ago. And I've got letters from 84, 88, 92, 97, and every time it falls out, and it says, all right, we're gonna combine all these together, and then it drops. And, you know, it just has been that for all these years, instead of just getting one done, and here it still sits. As far as size-wise, that building really needs to be double the size that it is right now. And so we're gonna take up closer to 4 to 5 of that acres over there with everything.
Well, I know it's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
I've talked to a few people that said we've been talking about this for 15 years.
Oh, it's more like 35, 40 years.
Yeah.
Which we can't give direction in a work session, so I'll just look around for questions, or do we want to ask administration to bring something back so we can have an actual vote about it and get more public input? What are the wishes?
I think bring back options to vote on.
Specific to the Gillespie property, or what are we looking at for options? Go ahead.
I just have one more
Yeah,
question.
go ahead, yeah.
Sorry, I'm definitely, just to answer
No,
your
but-
question, I'm definitely leaning towards the Gillespie property, but I do want to be forward thinking as well, since we're talking about potentially putting residential on the other side of Hemlock, and we're speaking futuristic about maybe a public safety in the Hemlock Triangle. I mean, I don't think, is there a way that you, if, in fact, I'm speaking because we as council have made no action, if one day we did make the Hemlock campground into residence, would it be possible to access that off of Diamond rather than Hemlock? Is there a way to get an easement through that Diamond?
For the residential subdivision, sure, you could make it a U-shape, you could do whatever you want when you design it. You've got areas off of Diamond that come through and off of Hemlock. I look at where we're at, that's one reason I want to stay toward that north end, because there's those two entrances in there that public works, we wouldn't have to bring any equipment out on on Hemlock.
Right.
And that way it'd just be whatever
Can I
else
ask a
might be
question
done.
specific to that really quick? So the drives off the highway, are those permitted driveway accesses? Do those have a driveway permit?
I believe they both are, because they were two lots.
That's good.
And so
Okay.
there's one for each lot on that end, and that's
Yeah.
where they're permitted in. The state has their paved entrances on both.
Okay, yeah, driveway permits are tough to come by.
Sure.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's fine, I just, we can't forget the flowers that are wrapped around that stop sign there, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to be very mindful of, regardless of whether there's a subdivision on Hemlock or not, I want to be mindful that a good amount of Seward residents do use Hemlock. It is still used, as an access to the schools. And I like entertaining the Gillespie properties, but I would want to make sure that we could, not make sure, I would encourage to try to find a way to access via Digraff, because that is an industrial road, and, that's what you expect when you go down that road. So I don't
You-
know if that's possible.
You mean for the city lot?
Yeah.
You want to
yeah.
access it through Dick Rap?
If we can't get proper access off the Seward Highway because of DOT
We do
or
have
whatever.
access off the highway for those.
Okay, but I'm just saying.
Oh, for.
Yeah, I agree, you know, and I'll just reinforce that, whatever we're doing in that area, you know, there's newer people, it might be interesting to look at, I won't say a memorial there, but let's be conscious to what's there and honor that, and remember that, but I agree, for the same reasons I'm not a fan of the Fort Raymond property for heavy machinery coming and going, like, the buses use Hemlock also,
Right.
and coming out of the school, they're told to go that way for the left-hand turns, you know, because we have that intersection at Sea Lion. So, you know, I agree with your traffic discussions. Dick Raff or the highway would be the
Right.
access.
And that's where we would be.
Yeah.
Is there, may I ask, is there already access off of Dick Rap right here?
We have it's one into the snow dump that was built in, but it's not a set entrance yet, but those are things that we would work on. I'd like to have a loop where we can come out both on Dick Rap and on the highways, what I'd like for Public Works. That gives us those entrances to just stay off Hemlock altogether. You know, as far as Public Works and big equipment. You know, if there was something else that came and go off that intersection, that's.
So Doug, when you guys go to dump snow, you go up the highway and you hang a left on Hemlock and then you hang a right?
Right now, we use Hemlock exclusively for the snow dump.
Okay.
And so that would eliminate that. We'd be able to make a different route in and out.
Okay.
Can we possibly, I don't know, is there any way that we could explore the possibility of extending Laurel Street over across to Dick Rap?
It's drawn in right now. There's no street there. There's a cul-de-sac platted in, but there's no road, street, anything there. It's in the trees. It's in the low area there, but the plat right now shows it a cul-de-sac. I don't think it's, I think those are things you can do. It's just would it cut across and how would you make that work? So there's ways to do those.
If we replat, consider extending that road through.
I think those are all things that we can look at future things to do with.
I would just be mindful that that is the low spot there, and that's where the water is going to flow, and if you're going to be putting a road into that, you're cutting
Cut
off.
that culvert.
Well, I understand that, but you're still putting, if you put a road there, you're still, I mean, there's a reason why the city acquired that land, or whatever, because it is a low spot on that side in case the river comes on this side of Dick Rap, on the south side.
You know, and the other thing I will say, you know, I'm not a fan of the city buying property when we're talking about diversing ourselves from some, but it would give us an opportunity to expand utilities, to get more utilities that way, to maybe pick up some more residential lots and help with that development, or, you know, complete some loops for redundancy, which I think would be helpful.
And that definitely was considered in our conversations, utilities and future expansion, and like you said, loops in for redundancy, better, it's just better for the system. So all of that has also been in the discussions.
Go ahead.
Well, I think I might have changed my mind. I was dead set against the Gillespie property, having read this all, but now I'm thinking that might be the better option. But what I'd like to see, if you bring it back, is double, triple check about the airport business.
Okay.
And also that, well, I'd like to see the LiDAR. I mean, I'm really concerned about flooding there. I mean, we wouldn't want to lose a brand new building when we've got one that doesn't flood right now. So, you know, those two things. But I would lean towards this now as I wouldn't have an hour ago. So.
And I think they have to wait until there's less leaves. Do you have that LiDAR scheduled at all, or?
They started on Saturday.
Oh, good,
And
nice.
they're waiting on a new crop for their unmanned aerial vehicle, and they are continuing tomorrow afternoon. So LiDAR's currently being collected, and it'll be probably 30 to 60 days before we have to date.
Yeah, I don't know what it stands for.
Okay, we don't
Sorry,
know what
I didn't mean to interrupt.
It's light imaging detection and ranging, so it basically builds a digital elevation model of the bare earth. So it's a bare earth model. We took all the
This is what you
structures.
remember well.
Excellent.
Yeah. And once we have the LiDAR data, we'll be able to share that on our parcel viewer. You can see where channels go, you can see the low-lying areas. And then our plan is to hire a water resource engineer to do some flood hazard modeling with that existing elevation model. And then they'll be able to tell us where flooding is expected to occur in different scenarios. And once we have that information, we'll be able to do some design and engineering, do some planning around new drainage, possibly through Hemlock area, maybe along the Surrey Highway, and do some design plans for the main channel crossing of Dick Raff Road, which is one of our big issues right now with the sediment loads.
So then timeline-wise, that's a while before that gets processed.
The LiDAR will have available probably the end of November. And then the water resource engineering, as far as recommendations for flows and conveyance of any floodwaters, that'll be, sometime this winter. We've got to bring that back to city council and to the assembly for reappropriation of funding, and then put that out for an invitation to bid.
So does that work with the timeline for the testing that you're doing at the public workshop? I mean, do those things match up with trying to pick a location?
The soils investigations at public workshops
Yeah.
are complete.
Okay.
That should be on the next meeting, I believe.
Okay.
We're looking, and hopefully we'll have them present that also. It's nice to have that third party that did the study coming
Yeah.
and give that data rather than us give an overview. So that's what we're hoping we'll have this tonight, more for the Low Point Lagoon, and then hopefully we'll be able to do that at this next meeting or one after, wherever that fits into the administration schedule.
So then I'll ask administration, sounds like that piece is happening. Does that timeline work with kind of what you're thinking? Gets us through the holidays to work on this too? Or?
Yes, it does. And we did know about the time frame for LiDAR. Stephanie's been keeping us informed of that, so we've known about that time frame. And when I did talk to Mr. Gillespie, as you know, he's well acquainted with municipal government, so I told him that it would take time. He knows that there's this work session going on. He knows that there would have to be a future meeting. He understands all of that. And so we do want that LiDAR data for this as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's due diligence. So the clerk's looking at me. I think, do you feel like you have enough, does the administration have enough direction for what needs to come back, or?
You said something. Yes, but yeah. Let me back up. So the way I understand it is to bring back action, and honestly, my action will be, as I recommended, to direct the city manager to do those things. But I don't, based on the LiDAR, I'm thinking the first meeting in December would be when I would bring that back. So we would have a little more information. We may be able to get some preliminary information. Would that be correct? Am I correct? Okay. And then we'll have that information. Does that time frame make sense?
Yeah, and
any other thoughts?
even if it's a subsequent meeting, because we're waiting on LiDAR, it sounds like that would be a key piece of information.
Maybe because due to the holidays and the budget. Okay, so I'm sorry, we're rethinking the time frame to the beginning of January, so that way, one, got the budget going on, and then the holidays and all of that going on. But I will contact Mr. Gillespie to let him know the time frame.
And any other comments from the public? Any other comments? Go ahead.
I think that schedule works. I think that's something that gives time to negotiate, gives time to go through. I didn't hear for sure the direction was it to proceed, I believe, with the Gillespie property.
It'll be on an agenda where they have to vote on that.
Right, but I mean, does that wait till December before you can start to proceed, I guess is my question. So that would be the only thing I was unclear on.
Yeah, we can't give any direction at a work session.
I realize
Yeah.
that, but do we wait till December,
Can you just
January to
clarify
give
this?
that?
Please. Council can give direction during work session. So if you want to direct the city manager to explore the Gillespie properties and bring back a resolution, That's acceptable at a work
Yeah,
session.
yeah.
What
No,
you
that's-
cannot do is vote.
Sure,
That's
sure.
the action. So-
Yeah, yeah, I mean, we're giving direction, you're right. I mean, we're giving direction to
Okay,
bring
I just-
something back in January.
I'm just,
But-
Yeah.
to the suggestion of bringing a resolution to give direction through a resolution would not be the way you would give direction.
Right, I misstated that, I'm sorry.
Okay.
My thought was to actually bring back the resolution to negotiate.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I misstated that. Thank you for clarifying.
And that'll give the public a couple blushes at it, so there'll be that resolution to negotiate, and then actually the resolution will come back to purchase the property. So that'll give additional public opportunity to weigh in on it.
Right, and so then it would also, there's the public hearing that has to take place as well, and those other items still have to take place. So the public will have the opportunity and will be notified of all of that as well.
I am really excited to move forward with the public works relocation, and I see lots of steps being taken, so I appreciate that for sure.
Madam Mayor, may I also add on the current site, also as we talked about the testing that's going on, but also working then with R&M for the rest of what we need to do for the water and sewer as well, because it only runs halfway, so we have some work to complete there. But working on that as well, simultaneous to everything else going on, so that that can be done as well.
Well, go ahead. You said, if you don't mind me clarifying, you said water and wastewater run halfway down Hemlock, is that correct?
No,
It stops at the,
go
if
ahead.
I may, it
Sure.
stops at the corner right by just east of Spruce, correct then?
No, on the
They were
current,
talking
the
about
city
the
manager
current
was speaking
Oh,
of
I'm
the
sorry,
current
I'm
site.
sorry.
Oh.
The current site.
The current
says-
location is what she's
Right.
talking
Oh,
about.
I'm
the
sorry.
water
Current
sewer
location,
stuff to get
yes.
work on.
Gotcha.
So they're working on engineering for what that might look, once the public works leaves, what the infill of utilities will look.
Right.
Right.
And we are speaking with the engineer as well for that area, not only because of Public Works, but like you explained earlier, possible subdivision, but just the overall area for water sewer infrastructure.
Well, I'm glad we're fixing the world, and it is now 5:42, and I will close the public